Hello again, welcome in the next video, which I will devote to my game that I played today on the league. Without further ado, I will just show you a game and then maybe discuss some of it. So I was white and I played d4, which of course, as you know, I play very often. My opponent replied knight f6, and I played bishop f4, which is a London system. My opponent played d5, e3, and c5. This is one of the main lines. So after c3, I managed to create this triangle in the center, supporting this pawn d4, and I have my bishop developed outside of the pawn chain, so it's a very safe way to play. My opponent played knight c6, I played knight d2, and queen b6. Queen b6 is a move that is often a theme in the London system for black, which is aimed to exploit the weakness that white has created by developing the bishop to f4. So namely, black is trying to win the pawn on b2. I played queen b3, challenging this queen, and I'm very fine if black takes it, because that gives me an open file, and the flank pawn is now closer to the center, which is also only to my advantage. But he didn't do that. He played c4, kicking my queen away, and I went queen c2. I didn't take his queen for the same reasons. And he played g6. g6 has dual purpose. One is to develop the bishop to g7, of course, but the more important one is to play bishop f5 with tempo and attack this queen on c2. Now, the correct move here is e4. But I kind of forgot that in my preparation and simply thought that after d takes c4, knight takes c4, it should be the correct move. But I didn't consider that. I actually forgot that this pawn is hanging, and I was only calculating this. And well, I thought that after knight takes c4, queen takes c4, this is sort of a problem. So I didn't want to play that, even though I should have. This is the best way to play. Instead of playing the move e4, I played f3. Which the engine doesn't like, and my opponent played knight h5, but the engine suggests e5, simply attacking in the center, and after bishop g5 says bishop g7, and the position is good for black. You see the dominance of the black pawns in the center, a lot of possibilities to attack the d4 point. The engine gives like -1.5. But okay, maybe after castles and g4, maybe this position is not so bad, but still black has a lot of possibilities and surely is in control of this game. However, after I played f3, my opponent did not play the correct move e5. He played knight h5, trying to take my bishop off. And I thought to myself, well, there are like 3 ways of meeting this move. There is bishop to g3. However, I don't think it's very good, because if knight takes g3, h takes g3, yes, I get the open file for the rook, but I don't want to damage my pawn structure on the king side. On the other hand, I could play knight e2, but then after knight takes here and knight takes here, okay, I have developed my knight practically without spending any time, but I lost my bishop for a knight, and this was a very good bishop that I would rather not lose. Hence why I played, in this position of knight h5, I played bishop to g5. And well, here again the best move, maybe the best idea like for the future, is e5, but black for now continued with the development. Bishop g7, I played knight e2, castles, and g4. Simply starting the attack on the king side with tempo against the knight. Knight went back, and here I was considering, well, perhaps knight f4 is a move. This is surely a possibility. However, black has a very nice way of countering this, because, okay, let's just see that after I'm threatening bishop takes knight on f6 and then winning a pawn, but actually black has a nice intermezzo, which is e5, attacking the knight. And here, okay, I can take on f6, and after bishop takes f6, yes, I can take the pawn on d5, but now black has the intermezzo, and it's check. And after king d1, actually after queen d8, the engine gives this position like minus 1.2, 1.2, sorry, which is generally a nice advantage for black. That is why. In here I didn't play knight f4, instead I played h4, simply aiming to attack this king here. So my opponent played e5. Finally he played that move. It's the best move in the position. And I didn't bother myself with this because he's not threatening anything so far. The pawn on d4 is well protected, so there is no threat, and there's no threat of e5 really. So I just continued my attack with h5. This also prevents some ideas of h6, because, well, if h6 is played, then I have a double attack on g6, so that would be very risky. My opponent took on d4, I recaptured, and now my opponent played knight to d8. Knight to d8 is a clever move, because he understands that he can never play h6 to distract my bishop away, but he can play knight d6 and get my bishop to move away from that. And here I played, I took on g6, which was quite obvious for me, but it turned out that it was not the best move. The best move in this position, according to the engine, is bishop f4, simply moving the bishop away, and if knight e6 is played, here the move recommended by the engine is actually bishop to e5 to sort of counter this dark square bishop. But it's not very a human way of playing. I simply continued with my plan. My opponent recaptured with the f-pawn, opening up his rook's eyes, and I castled queenside. Because my plan at this point was to play knight f4 maybe, but that would exploit my king a bit too much to these checks. So I played castle queenside, knight e6, and bishop e3. I didn't want to take on f6 or move to h6, that seemed pointless, so I simply retreated my bishop to e3. Then my opponent played queen d6. On one hand he's protecting the pawn here, also controlling this diagonal, which makes sense. Here I played bishop g2. Now what I want to exploit are the weaknesses of my opponent's king. This diagonal is very weak because my opponent no longer has the f-pawn. So if I manage to take this pawn, I do so with check, or at least with a pin. So in the long run, I will be trying to win this pawn on d5 with my bishop, which will later on win the game, but you'll see that later on. My opponent played b5, launching his own counter-attack on the queen side. And, well, I didn't spend any time defending this. I just played rook f1, which is aimed to pushing this pawn later on, opening up the bishop's eyes to the pawn, which is now even more powerful because the rook is still on a8. So after taking this pawn, I'll be threatening the rook. Now b4 and g5. And g5 maybe is not the best move according to the computer, but to my mind it's a very good move. It forces the knight to move away to h5, and here I played f4. Now there's only one move that the engine suggests that gives black a fantastic position, and it's knight c7, simply retreating your piece and defending the pawn on d5, which really is as simple as it looks like, simply stopping your own attack and just focusing on defending that crucial point. However, my opponent did not play that, and he took on c3, which, by the way, very much makes sense to me. Why does it make sense to me? Well, first of all, you have to realize that he's going to take something with check, so let me just take this pawn away before he does that. So let's first consider pawn takes. Well, here there might be some trouble, and actually a lot of trouble, after moves like queen a3, oh sorry, after moves like queen a3 and rook to b8, then bring the rook down to my king. That is a very dangerous idea. Also, now this line is so weak, it can be easily attacked with a rook. And knight c7 is still the correct move here. So basically that would be very much weakening my king. So after c takes, b takes c3, let's just consider one more move, which is queen takes c3. And here again, knight to c7 is the way to go. And then simply following up with some other moves, like for instance, in this case, it can be like rook b8, simply developing the attack. Also, just forgot to point that out, I always have a threat of taking on c4 with the knight, exploiting this pin. But if I take this with a queen, and say my opponent plays, like in the long run, he plays bishop b7, then this idea of taking on c4 will not be in order because of rook c8, and then my king and queen are vulnerable to these rooks. That's why I played the move which is by the engines considered best. So knight takes c3. Now there are multiple ideas based on this weakness of this pawn. Also this idea that I pointed out before, so knight takes c4. So here black is in a little bit of a problem. Still, the correct move here and the move that black has to play is knight to c7. But you have to just realize that after knight to c7, there are still ideas of knight takes c4, but they're not so powerful because now, after I take this, actually black managed to get 2 pieces for a rook, which is a good deal. So here, knight f7 was c7, sorry, was not played. I was expecting knight to g3, which would be forking obviously my rooks, but that would allow a lot of counterplay. I would take on d5, and then say after he takes on f1, I would recapture with a knight. And for instance, if he wants to save his rook, then the problems arise as my queen goes to h2 and, well, punishes that weakness severely. So I was also maybe considering like bishop takes d4, which would actually be a move that makes a lot of sense, yet here the best move is knight takes d5. And, well, still you have threats of this bishop taking the rook. You defend your bishop, you still have threats on this pawn. That's a good position for white. The engine says that after bishop takes on e3, knight takes e3, and knight to d4, there is a rough equality, or even the position is slightly better for white. I would much more prefer this position with white. But my opponent chose to play differently, and after I took on c3 with the knight, he decided to win the pawn on f4, which pretty much makes sense, but unfortunately for him doesn't work. Here I took with a bishop, and he took back with a knight. Now, here he probably didn't see the next move, which is rook takes on f4, which is actually crucial for this game. Because now, as you can see, this bishop is attacking the pawn on d5, and if it takes the pawn on d5, it does so with check, but also with the attack on the rook. My opponent played queen takes f4, but let's just analyze what are the other options. Let's say what happens if he took with the rook. Then actually, I played bishop takes on d5 check, and okay, let's say that king moves to h8. And here the big problems after bishop takes rook, simply winning a lot of material. Let's say after bishop f5, bishop d3, and queen takes d4. Okay, black has some compensation, but it's still a whole piece down. I think this position is winning for white, and the engine agrees with me. Well, the other alternatives to this are perhaps moves like bishop f5, attacking the queen here, but still the bishop takes on d5 is so strong. Let's say if black wants to play it tactically, so they take the bishop, they say, okay, I can win your queen here, but after you take this, actually, again, you emerge being a piece up, and remember that this rook is now defended by the knight. So let's go back to the game. My opponent played queen takes on f4, and I took with a check. Now here there are no correct moves, and black loses with every try. The best move here was rook f7, which loses immediately to rook f1, simply picking up this rook later on. Actually, the engine says that it's best simply to take this rook here, but obviously that's losing. So my opponent, and the other move that should be considered here is king h8, after which white has a pretty nice finisher, queen takes g6, and there is literally no defense to checkmate. Maybe the only other move which could potentially prevent checkmate. Okay, bishop h6 is just prolonging the inevitable. You see that this mate is coming shortly. Okay, queen c7 might be defending for a little while, but not for long. After bishop takes c4, this pawn will fall. So there is absolutely no defense for black here. And my opponent played bishop e6, which actually is no better. I simply took the bishop with check. He didn't block with rook to f7. He moved the king to h8, and again got punished with the move queen takes g6, which is threatening mate. The only way to avoid like a very quick mate is to give up the queen, which he did. He played queen f1 check, knight takes f1, rook takes f1, deflecting my rook away. He won the queen, but I played rook h8 check, forcing him to give up the bishop, and after I took the bishop, I emerged being 2 pieces up with a completely winning endgame, and therefore my opponent resigned the game. So yeah, what are the lessons that we could potentially draw out from this game? Well, I think the crucial moment was right around here when I made this mistake of playing f3, forgetting about control in the center, and he did absolutely the same thing. He didn't play the move e5, which would really pose him in a dominant position in this game. And afterwards, after the whole series of moves and rapid attacks, I have to say that maybe this position was very complicated in the end. I'm mostly talking about this position. A lot of tactical motifs based on knight takes c4, bishop takes d5, but also from his perspective, tactics against this pawn, or against or moving the knight to g3, forking the rooks. This is all very interesting. This knight to c7 also was missed, which would be actually a very good move for him. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this game, that you got something out of it, and hopefully see you in the next video. Bye.